Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's DMA webinar, The Cost of Returns in E-commerce and How to Reduce Them, which is sponsored by AccuZip. I'm Mackenzie Yulbig, the Program Coordinator for Education here at DMA. DMA Education is proud to support informative events like today's webcast. In fact, we provide a number of educational opportunities with our in-person seminars, our live onlines, and our on-demand courses. If you would like to learn more about these and other opportunities at the DMA, please visit thedma.org/education. And for today's session, please make sure to join the conversation and contribute any questions or thoughts you have by using the question function, which you can find on the right side of your screen. We will do our best to address all of your questions at the end of the webinar. And for those that are on Twitter, our hashtags for the event are #DMAwebinar and #eCommerce. We hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. Joining us today is Rolf Gerung, who is the Director of Sales at AccuZip. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Rolf.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the DMA. Hopefully everybody can hear me clearly. So I'm going to give you the 411. I'm not going to bore you with my bio because I know we're all busy and we want to get to the point. You can check out my LinkedIn profile there down below. And I would encourage you to link in with me, or if you find me on Facebook or anything. I love meeting new people. One of my hobbies, as I was telling Mackenzie, is writing songs. And the one thing that songwriting teaches you is to cut out the fat, make every word count. So we're going to make this webinar brief. I also heard a statistic, by the way, that 80% of people polled would rather forego intimacy than be subjected to PowerPoints, but because that's the medium we have, I'm going to go with it. Anyway, a little bit about AccuZip, since you can find out about me on your own, is we're one of the leaders in contact data quality, address hygiene, and basically everything postal. We've been around for over 25 years. Our organization was recently inducted into the Smithsonian Postal Museum, and really one of the only postal vendors that were inducted in there. To give you a better idea of what we do, we've got sort of a listing here: address hygiene, postal pre-sorting. But the best analogy I could give you is if you're familiar with H&R Block or TurboTax, they assist consumers to navigate the complex tax system. And they help you and all of us consumers navigate it to get the best tax return. And we do that with postal. So we help marketers navigate the complex postal system to help folks reduce costs associated with mailing and shipping, etc. And we also and some of those costs, as you'll learn later on, have to do with just if it gets delivered or not. So we help you get your intended parcel or a piece of mail to the intended recipient. So the subject of today is cost of returns, and this is some statistics I put together. I guess I could update some of these, but it's a huge cost to the industry. And so this first number here, the 642 billion, I want to highlight the word preventable, because there's a lot of reasons why things get returned, but when it comes to things that you could prevent, that's a heck of a lot of money. And later on, I'm actually going to show you a little case study on exactly what that type of ROI is. Short Packaging has estimated that e-commerce returns were about 30% of all orders, and that really represents a loss of almost 12% in annual revenue to a typical retailer. Of course, your numbers will be different. So in terms of the associated costs and what is preventable contributing factors, like there's costs due to when something gets returned to a call center tracking down that order. It takes people, maybe AI and robots, depending on how you do it, but that's time and money. There's the cost of sending the replacement, right? So there's a lot of associated costs with doing that. There's other other issues like fraud, which is a big, which I read recently was a big issue for a lot of folks and a concern. So, vacant addresses and apartment blocks without apartment numbers, people ordering things and, having them delivered there. And then the cost of the return handling. Some of you folks I noticed are, are in shipping, like automotive shipping, et cetera, that are on this call. And when that product, the auto parts or the wine or whatever gets shipped back, there's chargebacks, right? And on average, it's about $11. I think everybody's numbers are different, but those are some huge costs. And after you incur all those costs, you still don't have an updated address, right? So you can't even reship it at that point. So one of the biggest reasons for that is bad data. So on all the orders out there in e-commerce, e-tailer land, about 4.7% of orders, the consumers are making errors when filling out the form. So that's that preventable I was discussing earlier. Another 18%, which is pretty big, the address cannot be verified, which is super important. About 17% of the population moves every year. That's about 1.3% monthly. So if it's a recurring order and the address is bad, or it's a person that was in there and they think their address is correct and they don't look at it, and they do like a replacement order. Let's say I recently replaced filters for my water system, right? You don't replace those. You replace them annually or every 2 years. That's a large number of folks. Like 17% of your database is incorrect and you're shipping to those people. That's bad. And then almost 15%, they found multiple addresses in terms of what the information was entered. So a lot of this is just consumers not paying attention and fact-finding things. The reasons for returns, there's multiple. The shoppers deliberately ordering more of one product, I believe, and from the feedback I've gotten, it's primarily due to shippers' return policies, and also their free shipping policies. So why not get a small, medium, large of a garment if I don't know if it fits, or if I'm buying an automotive part, right? I'm not, I've got an older car, I'm not sure if this part fits. So I'll order two and I can ship it back. But the big one, and again, I want to key on preventable, because that's really the topic of a larger topic of this discussion, is incorrect address information. All right. So what's the impact? Well, 30% of all the retail orders are returned. Now, if you compare that to a brick and mortar return, that's about 9%. So it's big. And again, some of that is a result of various shipping and return policies. The 49% of retailers, offer free returns. So that makes sense of why that 9% would be different than 30%. And in terms of like what percentage of returns are out there, it's 30% of the purchase price on average. So now we've kind of have a baseline to do a little bit of math. And of course, the impact, I'm not sure about the audience on this call, but if you're in the shipping and transportation, chargebacks, there's a lot, and if you're the person that's responsible for making sure that consumers get what they want, it's a big deal. I recently ordered something from Costco, and it was an outdoor living set, and it was damaged. And I'll tell you what, the time and energy it took to get that thing returned. They were very good about it, by the way, but I can only imagine what the costs were, because I was talking to multiple individuals at multiple companies, and I'm going to give you guys all some data here later on that's going to show you like how many orders it takes to just make up the cost of one return. It's shocking. It's just, the data is staggering. But that shipping, the refurbishing, the restocking, the disposal, and then the value loss of the inventory, the carrying costs, and then just the overall customer satisfaction and customer experience. There's a lot of intangibles that are really, really tough to measure, but it makes a huge impact on the bottom line. So as promised, I recently did an implementation with a top 10 e-commerce retailer in the apparel business, and they had a couple of challenges. The one challenge was they really didn't have any oversight on rising return costs. They knew the returns were coming in, and they were getting chargeback fees from their shippers, right? So the UPS and FedEx reports and fees for undeliverable shipments. Every month they get a report and says, here's what we're charging you because these addresses weren't deliverable. So it is, in essence, the analogy the gentleman gave me was like the fox guarding the chicken coop. He just had no way to know if those addresses were really bad or not. And then, of course, they tens of thousands of dollars spent on undeliverable fees associated with the support expenses that we already just discussed about reshipping. That was basically the two challenges, right? They wanted to improve their deliverability, reduce the returns, increase customer satisfaction, et cetera. So what I did was I suggested, listen, why don't you send me a sample file and we'll audit that sample file to just see, what was preventable. So I think I've used the word twice now, preventable. This is the third time. Because there's some things you just can't prevent, right? Things happen, the actual shipper sends it to the wrong place, whatever. But from preventable, we're just talking about, that data and the consumers putting in the wrong addresses. I mean, if it doesn't get to its intended recipient, you got problems, right? So this particular file had a little over 18,000 records. And what we found was 36% of those, the address was not found. Like it was wrong, just flat out. So that order never had a chance to get to its intended recipient. Now, yeah, you can say sometimes, even with bad address or missing apartment number or whatever, it can still get there. I live in a small town. 17 years ago, I spent 16 months living at my outlaw's house while we were building a house. And I still get mail to their address, and the mail carrier who, knows us will still deliver the mail, even with the address totally wrong. So it's not impossible. The USPS will do that. But, by rule, and especially with some of the other shippers and, their policies, it's going to get returned. So a little over 4,100 had a missing unit number. The DPV confirmed stands for delivery point validation. And then, 4,300 had a street not found. So that's really significant. All right, so here's an example of the actual report. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in this, I will do this for free. If you need an NDA, you can send me a file or the NDA. We'll get it executed very quickly, and I'll give you this audit. It won't cost you anything. Because if I'm a head of transportation or in a role of responsibility to improve these at a company, then I want to know what I'm dealing with. And this is a perfect way to understand what's preventable, all right? So in this particular case, the update that I have is that for the first 6 months of this particular retailer, e-tailer, their delivery point went from, their DPV went from 87 to 93%. So they had a 5% improvement. But the biggest thing, and as you'll mention, one of their goals or challenges was, that validation to know whether or not that address was correct because of chargebacks. Their chargebacks were down $110,000. So that's the charge that the shipper presents the shippee with when the item doesn't get delivered or the address is bad. So that's staggering. And if anybody here on this call is responsible for that, I'm going to show you a super easy, inexpensive way to prevent this and look like a hero. So we're going to do some math. I'm going to show you the money here. Article I read recently in the Wall Street Journal estimated that the average return represents 30% of the purchase price. Okay, so a return for a purchase of $50 would be about $15. Now, we all know that margins are very slim in e-commerce because it's competitive. So on average, it's about a 10% margin. That would mean that, a retailer must successfully sell at least 3 units of the same product just to recover the cost of one return, right? So this is just some of the math on a pair of shoes and what a net loss is on a return there. In our case study, that 18,000 record file with that 36% undeliverable at $15, that means another $99,000. So on top of the chargebacks that they've have had, I mean, they're up a couple $100,000. So what's the solution? It's very, very simple. Point of entry data, and address correction, and data validation. This is an example, and I'm happy to send this to anybody who wants it. You can play with it. It's an API, and I've had people implement it within 4 hours. You put this in your checkout process where the individual puts their information. And I'm not talking about the Google thing that just stores your stuff in cookies. I mean, this is a real time in sub-second. It will correct the address. So you'll notice right here that I inputted El Camino Real and Atascadero incorrectly. I didn't even put a zip code. And then I clicked the validate button, and the output is a real address. Now, it's shocking because I spend a lot of time as a sales guy, contacting e-commerce companies, and I go through their checkout process, and I take screenshots of their lack of address correction and validation. And it's easily like only 1 in 10 actually do it and do it effectively. Some will have a little prompt like, "Are you sure this is the right zip code?" But in our case, we correct the entire thing. We'll also tell you that it's a business or a residence. All right, and then I didn't get into the sorry, I'm getting crazy here with the mouse. I didn't get into the rest of the data that is available to you, but it's the full report on that address, and it's data quality, and that's something that the API returns. You can build it any way you want. We actually also have services to help you build it if you like. So the next question is it complex? I think I mentioned it's, I've had people do it within 4 hours. We have basically 4 API calls. We work in a number of available programming languages. I don't pretend to be a programmer, not even on TV. So, it's Java, C++, PHP, you name it. And what's the cost? The cost is literally a fraction of a cent per transaction. And the great thing is that includes all the support, everything you need. So there's no reason not to do this. So as promised, I don't know how long I've gone here, but we are at the conclusion. If there are any questions that you'd like to address, feel free to use the question and answer bar there, and Mackenzie can field those. I will say that like you said, if you want the audit, email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's very simple, and I wish everybody good luck in your e-commerce endeavors.
Thank you all for listening in today, and thanks to Rolf for such an informative webinar. We will be sending out the recording and the PDF of the presentation within the next 48 to 72 hours. And if there are no questions, this concludes our webcast. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.